Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast where today Toby and me are going to be suggesting one player that needs to leave every Premier League club this summer before the end of the transfer window. Last week we did one player every club needs to sign, this week we're going to do one to sell. How do you find it, Toby? Do you find it easier to sell a player than buy a player?
Yeah, I think these sorts of videos are much easier to try and sell a player. I mean, you're only looking at one club's squad as opposed to looking at the squad, finding the potential weaknesses and then looking across the whole world of football. So yeah, it certainly felt like an easier task. But still, I think there's definitely some interesting picks, and it's going to be really interesting to sort of look at where clubs maybe have too many players in one position, maybe players not playing enough as they should, and seeing potential destinations for where those players could go as well will be fun to see. How about you? How did you find it?
Yeah, I definitely found it easier than one player every club needs to buy. I think there's a lot of clubs at the moment with a lot of bloated squads just because they've done all the business of buying, and now they need to offload a couple of players. And so we need to say that they can sell them for whatever reason you fancy, as long as it makes sense and what's good for the squad or the player, whatever you think you can justify. And I'm going to go first. And so I'm going to be going off with Arsenal, going in alphabetical order as usual. And there was a couple of options for Arsenal. I was thinking of Zinchenko. Arsenal have got enough left backs. I think of Fabio Vieira because of the fact that, he's loaned out to Porto last season. He's not really fancied ahead of the likes of Odegaard and Waneri. But actually, I thought those are sensible picks. Let's go out there a little bit. And so the player I've gone for is Leandro Trossard. And I think he's a very valuable squad player. I think often his importance gets a little bit downplayed. Last season, he did get 10 goals and 10 assists. I made 56 appearances in all competitions, which is, a mammoth amount. But I think we do have to take into account the fact that Arsenal had a lot of injuries. A lot of players had the worst season for injuries last season for Arsenal. And I think to myself, with 1 year left on his contract, a player who's already 30, if Arsenal wanted to make that jump to maybe make an elite signing in the left wing position, because I hear talks about Arsenal want Eze, and I'm not against that, but if you buy Eze, I think you already have one player that's, one player too many. And why have that extra player when we all probably know that Trossard's going to be leaving at the end of the season on a free anyway? Now, if he stays, contributes, and wins Arsenal Premier League title, it's worth it. You don't need the money. But if he's not going to be a crucial part of the squad, then maybe you could sell him. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think that left wing position is probably where we could do with making a little bit of money. And like you said, with Trossard only 1 year left, it feels like an opportunity to capitalise on that now. And there are links to Dortmund, I think, are interested in him for around that sort of £20 million mark, which I think wouldn't be a bad deal, especially with question marks over Madueke. Is he going to be playing on the left? Are we going to sign a left winger? I think that's a good opportunity for Arsenal, and it maybe means that somebody like Reece Nelson, who is still in that Arsenal squad, could potentially get a few more minutes this season as well, as sort of a replacement if Trossard does move on.
Yeah, to me it just seemed like one player which you could upgrade on, but it's difficult to do so, and you got so much time left in the window. Arsenal could if they wanted to, and we'll see what happens on that one. I don't think it will, but I think from a business sense, 1 year left, I think Arsenal should maybe consider doing it. Next up, we've got Aston Villa, and who have you gone for one player that you think they need to sell?
Yeah, for Aston Villa, this one for me felt like maybe a little bit of an obvious one, I would say, actually, and that is Emi Buendia, the central attacking midfielder who has fallen out a little bit of favour in Aston Villa over the last sort of year or two. Obviously spent half the season last year on loan at Bayer Leverkusen, where he actually ended up getting more minutes than he did at Aston Villa at the start of the season. He's still quite a decent age as well. He's only 28. I thought he was older than that when I was sort of looking through the squad. So I still think there would definitely be some interest in him. They'd be able to get a decent bit of money for him. And I think with players like McGinn and Rodgers and even Jacob Ramsey, I think being preferred in any of those sort of midfield three positions over Buendia, I think this would be an opportunity for Villa to sell. And there are some rumours going around potentially. Leeds looking at him. Daniel Farke, obviously the old Norwich manager when Buendia was there. Possible reunion there could be a good acquisition for Leeds. And he's still certainly got quality and just hasn't really worked out with Villa over the last few years.
Yeah, the injuries really haven't helped him, and it's really slowed his progress in what's been a Villa side who've really progressed. And at the time, he looked like one of their best players, but as is football, sometimes it can be really cruel. And I think it's one where I think it's time for Villa and Buendia to maybe both part ways. And yeah, I think that Leeds one could be a shout. I mean, I'm not sure if they'd be willing to take him permanently, but I think as a loan option maybe. And if he does well and they stay in the Premier League, if they sign him permanently, I think that's one I really like. But also, I think he's got the quality. He could easily go to a team abroad for a team in mid-table or competing for Europe and do a very good job. So, yeah, I really like that Bundia shout for Aston Villa. Up next then is Bournemouth, and me here with my pick for Bournemouth, and I was struggling a little bit because of the fact that they've lost a lot of players in defence, and I think that keeping a hold of a lot of their players is actually going to be something that's pivotal for them going on in the rest of the transfer window. So it had to be a squad player, someone who's maybe not going to get the minutes, because losing any more first team players I think would, be a massive blow. So I've gone for Philip Billing, because obviously for a while with Bournemouth in the Premier League, he was a very important part of them staying up and a crucial part of their midfield anchor. But last season, he only played 10 matches in the first half of the Premier League before being loaned out to Napoli. There you thought maybe he'd get more minutes, but he had a similar record. He only had 10 matches played in Napoli as well. So I think it's one where he signed for 15 million from Huddersfield a few years back. He's only got 2 years left on his contract now to 2027. He's got players in the midfield like Ryan Christie, Cook, Scott, Tyler Adams. I think they're all going to be ahead of him. He could play left back, but I really like Adrian Truffet, who they've signed. He could play centre back, but that's just a makeshift often. And I think it's one where he's not needed at Bournemouth anymore, to put it kindly. I think he needs to go out there and get minutes himself. And I think it's one where Bournemouth could try and maybe recoup as much of that £15 million as possible.
Yeah, I think with Billing a few seasons ago, for me, he was probably seen as Bournemouth's one of their best players. He had a really good strong season once, and I think now he's had a bit of a curse of being that sort of utility player, being that sort of James Milner role where he doesn't quite have a set position. He can play in a number of positions. He can almost play up front basically or off the striker, and I think not having that position nailed down in a squad of Bournemouth's quality has made him fall off the radar a little bit, and he definitely still has the quality, I think, like you said, to go somewhere and make an impact. And I think he's quite a unique player, sort of in terms of his build as well and his attributes. So would be a really good asset to a team if he can find somewhere where he would start, because I think he's definitely good enough to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in terms of clubs he could go to, I think anyone in the bottom half of the Premier League he could, be a very good squad player for. I think like he went to Napoli, he could go abroad and also do a very good job. He's still a decent age. He's still the right side of 30. He's he's very physical, like you said, and I think a lot of teams would really good to have him. And he could be one where it's just a cheap transfer, one that helps the squad, and then maybe adds a little bit of a finishing touch to a team who are ready to compete. Up next then is Brentford, and that's your pick. So who have you gone for, mate?
Yeah, this was one of the more difficult ones, I would say, actually. I think Brentford have got a really good all-round squad, and a squad that's had a lot of the fat trimmed off, I think. I don't think there's many positions where they have too many players or many players that are lacking in quality to be seen as a really good squad player. So I've gone for Frank Onyeka, who I think has been a really good servant for Brentford over the years. However, did last season spend it all on loan at Augsburg in the Bundesliga and got really good playing time there. I think he played around 31 games, I think, overall. And I think with him just going on loan, not being seen as potential a super valuable player for them, it's something where maybe somebody like Augsburg or another Bundesliga team could come in and sign him on a permanent. The only issue there, potentially, Norgard obviously having gone to Arsenal, is that now a position where they do need an extra man, potentially. But I think it could mean that Yarmouk would maybe step up a little bit this season and get some more playing time, which would be great, because when he did play, he looked really good. So, yeah, swings and roundabouts really with that pick.
I agree with you on Onyeka. I think with Norgard there, he was just so good that Onyeka could just never get into the side. And it's not until you really watch Brentford that you realise how important Norgard is to that midfield. And I think Arsenal got a coup signing him. But yeah, I've seen Yarmouk in pre-season playing in that sixth position, even though I initially had him pegged down as more of an attacking midfielder. So to see him in the six, see him do well in pre-season, and then you kind of think to yourself, well, Onyeka's older, you bought him for a larger fee, it's pretty much done for him, you would imagine, but never say never. Maybe you want to be risk-averse, considering everyone's mind, they've got you quite low down in the Premier League with the predictions, so yeah, I think it's fair enough. I think it's one where everyone needs to part ways, and maybe it's better for him to move on.
Yeah, I definitely think he is good enough. Again, I think that's the thing with a lot of these players, the picks that we're doing, they're not players that are bad players need to be gone. They're just players that will be able to find a starting position somewhere else. And if the club can get some money for them, it's a win-win.
Yeah, we'll move on then to Brighton and Hove Albion with my pick for them. And I look at Brighton, and I think very similar to Bournemouth, and it's not going to be the case for everyone, but I did think they're a side competing and trying to elevate the position in the league, get more European football. So I thought, no, I don't want to be selling any of the first team players, especially with the likes of Carlos Baleba recently being linked to Manchester United. That's definitely not something you want to see as a Brighton fan. So I thought, what players do they have in the squad? And they've got a lot of players because they've signed a lot of young, exciting talent who they're hoping to develop. But one who, in my opinion, is probably not going to make the cut, and therefore I've decided that I think that Brighton should sell them, is Jeremy Sarmiento. And he spent the second half of last season on loan in the Championship in 23-24, and then last season he spent the entire season on loan at Burnley. He only got 3 goals in 20 games for Ipswich 2 seasons ago, and then 4 goals in 35 appearances last season on loan at Burnley. And when you think about the fact that, he's already 23, but then you think about that Brighton wingers, Minter is younger than him, and he's only 21, 22, and he's already got a better attacking output. He looks like twice a player that Sarmiento is. But then Brighton have also got Buonanotte and Ciso, Solly Marsh. You think about it and you just think to yourself, he's too old now in compared to some of the other players. He's not as good. And, I think a lot of championship sides would be really, really happy to have Jeremy Sarmiento. That's not a knock on him just because I don't think he's quite ready for the Premier League. But I think Brighton are more than willing to sell him. I think they've got a very good relationship with their players and the players' agents because they realise that they're a stepping stone. But also, sometimes if it doesn't work, we need to find a move that works for all parties. And I think he could very much go to the Championship, maybe for a fee of probably maximum 5 million. I'd say maybe 3 to 4 million. He could go to the Championship. I think he could do a very good job and maybe bounce back to the Premier League with one of those clubs if he gets them promoted.
Yeah, and I think with Brighton's model, they're quite happy to maybe admit where a transfer hasn't gone quite as well, and they're signing so many youngsters every season that a case like Sarmiento, where he has gone on loan and maybe doesn't have a super high attacking output in terms of goals and assists, but is a good player, and you can see that there is quality there. So I think Brighton could probably do with cutting a few players similar to that maybe they signed 3 or 4 years ago, hoping they were going to blossom into one of these amazing players that we see so often with Brighton, and maybe just cut their losses on that one.
Yeah, you're up next then with the first newly promoted side in Burnley. Who do you think they need to sell? I'm assuming it's not going to be a first team player.
Yeah, definitely not for Burnley, and they really do need to try and keep those quality players and those players who performed so well in the Championship last season, especially defensively. I feel like that was, for me, defence was just off the table in what they should clear, really. But they have got a large squad. They have got a lot of players carrying up through the Championship, and one player I picked out that I can't say I've ever heard of, let alone watched him play, is a Macedonian winger in their team called Darko Cherlanov. Simply because he's been on loan for the last 2 seasons. He was at Schalke in the Bundesliga 2 years ago, and he was at a team that I'm not going to try and pronounce because I've written it down really badly and I can barely even read my own handwriting, but it was in the Polish league. They probably wouldn't get much for him at all. I think $1 million would probably even be a good deal in this case, considering the little football he has played for Burnley. But just want to get off the wage bill, essentially, and move on.
Yeah, I don't think I can comment on the player anymore, to be honest, mate, just because I haven't seen him that much either, like you said. So I'm going to leave it there. I think he did a decent job, and I'm going to move on to our next club, which is Chelsea. And there's a couple of options with Chelsea. They've kind of got their own bomb squad going on at the moment, with the players they're trying to get rid of. But, like with most bomb squad, those players, some of them are really, really good, and some could easily go to other clubs and play at a very high level. But I've gone for a player who played a lot of games for them last season and has been linked with a move away in recent days and weeks. And I've gone for Nicholas Jackson, a player who we were actually talking about before we started recording. And I think it's one where it's quite interesting, almost the curious case of Nicholas Jackson, because last season he was a very important part of their squad. But I think the back end of last season maybe showed that maybe Maresca's lost faith in him a little bit, because there was a period in the middle after, I think it was around Christmas time, when they went to Goodison Park and they didn't win that game, where I thought to myself, Chelsea could be in the third race before that, and then they didn't win that game. They then went on a bit of a run. Nicholas Jackson also got injured, and for a large part of that run, I thought to myself, do you know what? Do you know what they're missing? They're missing a player like Jackson up front in that team when he was out injured. But then he came back. He got the red card against Newcastle, which was just silly. He got the red card in the Club World Cup against Fluminense, which was just a brain fart. I don't know what he was thinking. And to me, it does seem like maybe they moved away, because if you sign one player in Liam Delap, then that's competition for your place. If you sign two in Liam Delap and João Pedro, to me that's a sign that you're being asked to leave because you're no longer fancied and you should make your way out the door. He only signed 2 years ago for £30.1 million from Villarreal, so I think Chelsea could easily make the money back. I mean, in today's market, probably double, I think, is a minimum of what they could get, considering the fact that last season he got 13 goals and 6 assists, so almost 20 returns in the Premier League. He's still only 24. I can see him going to a Premier League club. I can actually see it, although I don't think Premier League fans really warm up to him that much. I think maybe wait to see how the whole Isaac, Sesko, Vissa transfer debacle, how that all goes, how the pieces fall, and then maybe make a move after that. But also I can see him go to Italy. I think AC Milan playing 3-5-2 at the moment with a new manager, Allegri. He could play up top with Rafa Leao. I think that'd be really exciting for him and AC Milan, but I think it might be a bit pricey. But I'm going to suggest Nicolas Jackson for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think when a club's signing two strikers, it's not going to be good news for the strikers who are already there. And with Nicolas Jackson, yeah, it's such a strange one because he does still seem to perform and he does seem to still put numbers up. But I just think the style of player that he is doesn't really fit that sort of elite club level that I think Chelsea are certainly aiming to be this season. I think he would thrive a lot more potentially at that sort of step down where he might have more opportunity playing against higher lines, where things like his close control and his overall game aren't as necessary and he can get back to, I think, what we saw at Villarreal, where I think he did still play his best football. So I think that would be good in both cases. Whether any clubs are going to be paying the sort of 75, 80 million that Chelsea are looking for, I really, really don't think so. I think it's going to be something around 50 maybe, and even then that's decent profit, and it's essentially a straight swap for what they got with João Pedro, who maybe fits them a little bit better, but yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, who knows, maybe Nicolas Jackson to Brighton and then Brighton get a better deal, who knows. I do think it's one where you just wait and see. If you're Jackson, just wait and see how everyone's moving, and I think it feels harsh to say someone would panic and go for him because he is a good player, but I do also think that, like you said, the style of play, and I think maybe the attitude has maybe rubbed some people the wrong way in terms of trying to recruit him this summer. So I think he will get a move, whether it's permanent or a loan. I think Chelsea, if they can, like you said, if they can get 70 or 80, that's mental money. But I think that is today's market.
They've done a miracle there if they could do that, I think.
Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised because they've been really good at getting some fees for some of their players this summer so far.
Yeah, true.
Well, you're up next then with Crystal Palace and Oliver Glasner's side. What player are you suggesting for them?
Yeah, this is one that I think for the club it is going to be a big loss. I think for the player, they probably are ready for that step up, and that is Mark Gahey. And it's been a whole series of rumours and news and everything about him. With a year left on his contract, he's probably not going to re-sign next year. And I think if Palace let a player of that quality, possibly England's best centre-back at the moment, go for a free, I think will be a huge, huge loss for them. Newcastle last season bidding 65, 70 million, denied. They didn't want to get rid of him. I think they were still pushing for that contract renewal that didn't happen. And now this season, I think they just need to cash in and go. I think they will still be able to get 45, 50 million if they really push. I think Newcastle will still be interested. I think Liverpool will still be interested for that price point. And they just need to get it done. Sign a cheaper replacement, somebody who's still got that quality, somebody that they could still spend 30, 40 million on to replace him. But I think they do need to cash in, and if he goes for a free, I think it'll be a massively missed opportunity for them.
If they let him go for free, then their model of buying to sell doesn't really work, especially for one of their best assets. And so I think he will move. I think it might be one where I think Liverpool are looking a bit short at centre-back at the moment. They've got a couple of niggles in terms of centre-backs at the moment in terms of injury concerns. So we'll see how they line up come the first game week of the season. And you might even end up with someone like Wataru Endo playing at centre-back. I think Newcastle ever since the summer after they signed Sven Botman, we feel like we've been saying they need to sign another centre back to play right side the centre back, because I think in the Champions League, I think Fabian Shaw is a very solid Premier League defender, but I think against some of the elite strikers, he might end up getting a little bit exposed. Although on this day, I think he's decent. So yeah, those are two clubs who I think Liverpool and Newcastle again will be competing for another transfer this summer. But I also think that you could have easily said Eberechi Eze as well. So they've got a few players. Palace. I don't think their window is done by any means.
No, certainly, and I think Eze, that Arsenal move still feels like it's lingering a little bit, and maybe Arsenal are just wearing down towards the end of the window. I think to try and get some cash off, which would be a shame if it came down to that and those moves don't happen because Palace are holding out for a little bit more money. Because I think it would be really exciting to see those players at like one of the top clubs as well and see if they can still perform as well as they have for Palace.
Yeah, we'll move on then to Everton, who are my team. And I was struggling with Everton, like I have with a couple of these. And the Everton one was because of the fact that they released so many players they didn't have last season. And they had a couple of players who were on loan who they all sent back to their parent clubs. And David Moyes, during the preseason, was saying that, he thinks Everton may need to recruit up to 10 new players. And so selling any of the current players has been really, really hard. I didn't want to go for like a third choice goalkeeper because I think that's boring. So I haven't actually suggested anyone for Everton for them to sell, but I'm going to suggest a player that they should maybe leave, and that for me is Harrison Armstrong on loan. And that's only because the 18-year-old looks like he has bags and bags of talent, but I'm not sure about how much game time he's going to be getting this season. Especially when you think about the likes of Idrissa Gana Gueye, who at 35, I think, or maybe 36, is still absolutely balling, one of Everton's most important players. They've got James Garner in there as well. There's just signed Kieran Dewsbury-Hall from Chelsea. They got Alcaraz as well. So they've got so many players in that mix. I think a loan for Harrison Armstrong would do him a world of good. I mean, in the second half of last season, he went out on loan to Derby. He played, I think it was 12 starts and 3 substitute appearances, 15 appearances. And he came back in pre-season. He looked a much better player from the limited game time I did see of him before he went out on loan. So I think another loan spell in the first half of the season. Maybe have a break clause in that contract as well, though, because with Gueye, I don't think he's retired from international duty, so he's probably going to go into Senegal in the African Cup of Nations. So maybe just have a break clause in case you don't know the injury situation at the time. Bring him back, see how he does, and integrate him back in the first team, because I think he's a very, very talented player. So a little bit of a cop-out, because I think they need to keep a hold of a lot of their players. But if there was one player that needs to leave, it would be Harrison Armstrong on loan.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a squad like you said with Everton's where they actually need to just get numbers in the door, I think it would be a bad suggestion for them to sell somebody, and especially to sell somebody senior. And actually, I'm just going to jump straight into my next one because it's actually a really similar pick that I've gone for here for Fulham. And again, I think with Fulham, they have got a really, really good squad. This, along with Brentford, for me, was the hardest pick because I don't think there's any players that they should get rid of, to be honest. I think they've got good cover in all positions. They've got quality cover in all positions. And any of their starters, I don't think they would be able to particularly cash in on, which was also the other sort of thing I was looking for. So I've actually gone for another loan move, like yourself, with Armstrong. And I've gone for Joshua King, the 18-year-old youngster, can play across the midfield, can even drop in at fullback, sort of similar to how Hinchelwood has played at Brighton. And he looked really, really good in his cameos for Fulham last season in the Prem. Really, really, really rate him. And I think with some of the competition ahead of him, I think he might get some more minutes this season, but I don't think it's quite enough to sort of really aid his development. And I think, like you said, similar to Armstrong, I think if King can get a loan move to a good championship side, somebody who is going to be pushing for playoffs or even pushing for automatic promotion, I really think he's good enough to just go straight into that and do it. He has started the last 2 friendlies actually for Fulham, which surprised me when I looked at it. But I don't think he's quite breaking into that team just yet in terms of that sort of Prem side. So yeah, a loan move for him would be nice.
Oh, I think with King, I think maybe he's a little bit ahead in terms of what Fulham have done so far in the Premier League since they've been back promoted. They've been absolutely incredible. I think the only thing that maybe could say is you wish maybe you had some more youth players, some homegrown players getting into that first team side and maybe creating a pathway for them. And I think maybe King could be he could be that first test dummy and say, okay, well, we're going to keep you around in the squad, and then maybe we're going to put you into that first team. Because, like I said, I saw the highlights from those preseason games. I thought to myself, he does look alright. He can handle himself. Depends about obviously with 18-year-old, he doesn't look physically demanding in that midfield, but I think he's got all the technical ability in the world to be able to cope. So, yeah, very similar to Harrison Armstrong and Josh King, but which one of them breaks it out into the first team first? That we'll have to wait and see. But I think both players who have both really promising futures ahead of them.
Yeah, I definitely think King could get into that team, but it's one of those things where I think if he hangs around and doesn't, and the fact that Fulham have also spent a decent amount of money on players like Emil Smith-Rowe and Iwobi, are they going to be the sort of players who are pushed out of the side? I'm not too sure. I do think I know he's been playing a little bit deeper in pre-season, but I think if you can get him a little bit further forward, he's just so good technically that he could really make things tick for Fulham. I think a little bit higher up the pitch, but maybe even playing deeper, maybe his options are a little bit better to get in there into the squad.
Yeah, maybe. But we'll move on then to Leeds United, and my pick for them. And I was listening to Danny Farker talk, and he's made comments that Patrick Bamford is been told he's allowed to leave after spending 2 seasons in the Championship and really having a terrible time with injuries. But since that was out in the open, I thought I'm not sure I really wanted to go for that as an option. So I was looking at the squad, and I thought there was an issue that maybe they need to address that I don't think Leeds fans are talking about too much as a priority, but something that, if they can do it, it'd be great. So I've gone for Isaac Schmidt, the fullback, the Swiss fullback, because I look at Jayden Bogle at right back, and I think he's absolutely fantastic. And I think he is good enough to be in the Premier League, either for a newly promoted side or a side in the bottom half of the table. I think he is good enough, but I do worry that his injury record hasn't been perfect over the last few years, although he had a good season last year. And I do think that if the worst were to happen, and if he was to get injured, and then Schmidt was to go in at fullback, I would worry. I think most teams are probably going to be going at Leeds next season anyway, but I think he would be a substantial weakness compared to the other players that were already there and the ones that they've recruited really well as well. Considering the fact that they only signed him last year, and I know it's harsh, but signed him last year for £2.5 million. He only made 12 appearances in the Championship, all 12 off the bench. He's 25. He's not like he's a really super young player, and so it is brutal. But I think it's maybe one where it could, if he plays 6 to 8 games in a row, if Jayden Bogle gets injured, that he could, I think, cost Leeds their place in the Premier League. And it is those small margins. And so, yeah, I've gone for Smith, although I think it is harsh. But yeah, that's why I've gone for him. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really difficult position for Championship sides, and I think that's why we so rarely see them sell any players anyway, that picking them is such a difficult task. And like you said, I think with them coming up, and there's always a risk that they're going to go back down and players are going to get poached, that if, for example, Bogle comes up and has a really good season and then he goes, and then they could be in a position where they've got no right back if they get rid of Smite. But if they, with these size of some of these clubs that come up from the Championship, they do have to cut some players out, and it's really, really difficult decision. So I think picking somebody like a backup right back who maybe they could still get a little bit of money for, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think I would have gone for him if Jayden Bogle had an impeccable injury record. He was never injured whatsoever. But just because there's that chance, I don't think any newly promoted side, considering how hard it is to stay in the Premier League, should take any chance whatsoever. Just do whatever you can to stay in the league. And if you have to be brutal, you have to be brutal. I think that is the Premier League at the moment. Talking about Premier League, you're up next with the Premier League champions in Liverpool. Who do you think they need to sell?
Yeah, this would have been an easy one maybe a few days ago. It would have been an easy pick of Darwin Núñez. Get him sold, get it done, but it has now been done. We've had the here we go for him to go to Al Hilal. And I think you got really good money for him as well, actually. Was it around 55 million euros? I think that's brilliant business from Liverpool to get that. And it just didn't work out. It's fine. I think there's still a player there, but anyway, nonetheless. My actual pick now is Harvey Elliott. Seems to have fallen out of favour at Liverpool a little bit, not getting too many minutes, not trusted with too many starts. And whether that's in terms of how Slot sees him as a player and his quality, or how he sees it in terms of his system, that maybe he just doesn't quite fit in. I think Slot probably likes his wingers a little bit sort of more naturally wide, and Elliott is that weird position where is he an 8, is he a 10, is he a winger? I'm not too sure, and I think a club should probably take a risk on that and try and find out where his best position is, put in a good bid and go for him, because I think he has shown amazing quality when he has played, and there is such a good player in there. And I think now that he's 22, I think he needs to find a place where he is a starter. There's rumours of him going to Spurs. There's rumours of him going to RB Leipzig, which I think would be a really, really good place for him to go, actually, especially with Xavi Simons going to Chelsea, it looks like. The Bundesliga, as we know, has been a fantastic place for young English players to go and thrive. So I really would like that move. But I think any club who can go in 40, 50 million, you'd get in such a good player.
If I was advising Elliot, I'd be saying take that RB Leipzig offer. If it's there, take it, go. Because I think with the league being a little bit more transitional than some of the other leagues and a little bit less physical, I think he would absolutely thrive there. And I do agree. I think Elliot is one that will leave. I just think with 2 years left on this contract, I think he's not getting game time. In terms of last season, Dominic Szoboszlai was the first choice most attacking midfielder. Then Liverpool go out and sign Florian Wirtz, who is now the Premier League's most expensive player ever. A Liverpool club record transfer fee, and he's a player who's younger than Elliott and better than him, and he's one of the best players in the world. So I think you just don't see the space, you don't see the minutes for him, and I think that's unfortunately a very sensible one. But at 22, he's not just a young player, he's also a very experienced 22-year-old as well. So he could, not only on the pitch, off the pitch, I think he could contribute a lot. So if I was him, definitely go to RB Leipzig.
Yeah, and I think like you said, when we saw him at the under-21 Euros, he looked like such a senior player in those sort of interviews and on the pitch and things like that. And like you said, if he can apply that to another team, and he's going to have 10, 15 years left of his career, now it feels the right time, I think, for him to go and make a bit more of a name for himself, really.
Yeah, and up next we've got Manchester City, with who they've got a couple of players. They've got a couple of players on the fringes of this squad. I wasn't going to go for a first team player because I think they need to go about and trying to, get back the Premier League title, which they've been so dominant in for the last few seasons. And so I had Stefan Ortega as an option, but I wasn't going to go for him. I've gone for Jack Grealish. Jack Grealish, who just seems to be absolutely loved by the English press and English fans. And I think rightly so, because I think he is an absolutely phenomenal player on this day. And I just think that at the moment, when I see him play football, I don't think he's enjoying it, if I'm being completely honest. I think he needs to go out, even if it's just a loan, because obviously his wages are a lot. He is 30 now, and so is any club going to really realistically pay his transfer fee and his wages? I'm not quite sure. He's been linked with the likes of Everton. I think that'd be a great move. He's also been linked with the likes of Spurs, especially on the back of James Maddison rupturing his ACL. I think that would be a great move, especially when you also consider Spurs have just lost Heung-min Son as well. So I think he could cover both of those positions and do really well, play Champions League football at a very high level. And to me, I look at this Man City squad and the options that they have of the likes of Marmoush, Doku, Savinho, Bob, Echeverri, Foden, Cherki, all that attacking midfield, all wing positions. He's not going to get minutes. Pep Guardiola says he really likes Jack Grealish, and of course he does. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. But I think come game week 1, I'll be surprised if Grealish is even in that matchday squad at all, even on the bench. So I think that would set the alarm bells off for Grealish and go, no, do you know what? I definitely need a move. And just under a year ago, he was playing for England under Lee Carsley, and everyone was like, he's back, and I just really want to see that Jack Grealish back.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, in terms of the way Manchester City run their squad, I think they would rather have players like, as you said, Bob and Cherki and Savinho on that squad, so to develop them, because they're so much younger than Grealish as well, which is such a big factor. And I think with a player like Grealish, who the way that he plays is such a pure dribbler and somebody who really thrives in take-ons, you need that confidence, and that is something that has just dropped massively over the last season. I think a loan move, it would be perfect. Get a loan move out to Spurs would be ideal. Still at a really, really good level. Would get into that squad regularly and just get that confidence back, and then maybe assess things after that. Maybe then he can force his way back into that Manchester City team. But I think at the moment, chances of that are pretty low, unfortunately.
And even if he did go to somewhere like Everton, hopefully David Moyes would see the qualities that he would have. I'm sure he would, and say, "Do you know what, I'm going to give you a little bit more of a free roll, and I'm going to let you kind of do whatever you want. Just make sure you do it in the attacking third and don't do it in the defensive third, and give him a bit more freedom." And I'm talking as if he's a bit of a luxury player. He's absolutely not. He can defend and work really, really hard as well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played as often as he did in Man City's treble-winning season. So I think I just want to see him get football, and I want to see the fans of the club he goes to appreciate him, because he's such an exciting player. And I also think with England, on the left hand side, you got, what have you got? You got Rashford, you got Gordon, you got maybe Giddens coming up, Sancho, Madueke can play on the left. No one's really cemented that left hand side down. So I think there's a real opportunity with the World Cup next summer. Go somewhere, play a lot of league minutes, become the starter, become one of the best players in the Premier League again, and then get yourself back in that England squad, because he is undoubtedly good enough. But from Manchester City to Manchester United, who have you gone for them? I'm guessing there was a few options here.
Yeah, and I've actually put them all down because they're all such similar situations, and they all need to go, and they all will go, I think, this summer. And that is Jadon Sancho, Anthony, and Alejandro Garnacho. Sancho, the fourth highest wages at the club at 250,000, and on the player side, he just needs to forget about Man United, move on, and try and get in a starting 11, try and get some rhythm back, and try and find that form that he had at Dortmund again. Anthony, a similar case, really, really shined at Real Betis, and we saw the player that I think maybe we were expecting from him at Man United there at Betis get a move that's similar. If he can go to Betis again, that would be absolutely ideal, but Manchester United may be holding out for a little bit more money than they can afford. And Garnacho at the moment seems like the one most likely to go, with a move to Chelsea, personal terms agreed, still working out that fee, however much that may be. But again, I think that would be really good for United to get a good fee for him, considering they have signed Cunha and Mbeumo. And from the player side, clearly not wanted at United, go somewhere where he is going to be wanted and play regularly. For me, the most important one of those three, I would say, is probably Jadon Sancho. I think in terms of the wages that he is on, Man United could really do with cutting that out. And I think because there is still a quality player there, they could still probably get a decent amount of money for him, maybe 25, 30 million if they really push for it. So yeah, I would go for Jadon Sancho for Man United.
Yeah, it depends what the financial package is as a total, because it's the transfer fee plus the wages. And I'm not sure, because obviously you get a higher fee for Garnacho, you'd assume, but the wages of Sancho are ridiculous for what his output is. So someone would need to do the maths, and I don't have it in front of me, but whoever costs more to keep if you weren't going to sell them next season, that's a player that Man United absolutely need to sell. I think I would agree with you and go Sancho, just because come January he's already going to have one eye on the next club because of the fact that his contract expires at the end of next season. So I think it would be Sancho over Garnacho, but only just, I'd say, because with Garnacho you get all of that money because he's a U-team player, so that goes straight into your pocket as a PSR result. But yeah, just Sancho. I'm going to agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. They're all players who are not even on the subs bench in their pre-season, let alone in the Premier League, because they're all just being sidelined to be shipped out. So it'd be interesting to see where they go and how much they get. I think that could be a real big factor for Man United's season, especially with the money that they're looking like they're going to be spending this year too.
Yeah, the money which they've just found behind the sofa out of nowhere. I'm not really sure how they're doing all this spending, if I'm honest. But a team who definitely needs to do a bit of spending is Newcastle United. And if we're talking about a player that they need to sell, if I'm a Newcastle fan at the moment, I'm not sure I trust the club to be able to replace the player adequately enough, considering how their search for a striker is going at the moment. So very much, I couldn't sell any of the attackers because I think Newcastle are, well stocked in the attacking front and they're all good. So I wouldn't want to sell any of those. In the midfield, I do look at that midfield and think behind the first choice midfield three, there's not a lot of depth, so I didn't really want to send in the midfielders. So then naturally I was left with the defenders, and again, being in the Champions League, don't want to sell any first team players. So I've gone for a backup option. I've gone for Matt Targett at left back. And when I think about my Newcastle's left back options, they've got Lewis Hall, who unfortunately was injured at the back end of last season. He'll be back, he'll be fit, he'll be phenomenal like he was for them before his injury. You then got the backup option of Dan Burn, who, if Sven Bodman's fit, then he's probably going to be starting left centre back, and then Dan Burn could cover both left back and left centre back. And you've also got another option of Tino Livramento if you wanted to move him from right back to left back, and you could put in Trippier into the first team at right back. And I think, considering the minutes that Matt Targett actually played last season, only 7 appearances, made less than 90 minutes of total football in all competition last season. Surprisingly, he did get 3 assists though, which did surprise me. So that's really good output considering the amount of minutes he did play. But I think you can probably give those minutes to a youth team player that mainly were from substitute appearances in games just to see it out. And you could give those to younger players in cup competitions as well, like the League and FA Cup. So for me, there weren't too many players, but if you had to sell one, it'd be Matt Targett.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick, and a pick that makes sense, especially, like you said, Newcastle's squad. Not as drastic as Everton, I would say, but it's definitely a squad where it does feel like they could do with a few more backups and potentially improving those backups as well. And left back with Livramento, if Lewis Hall needed a rest or was out, you could have Livramento move across to left back and have Trippier come in. So I think that definitely makes sense to move him on. It wouldn't obviously be a massive sale for them, but would give them an opportunity, I think, to maybe bring in somebody else, somebody younger, like you said, to fill that void.
Yeah, the other option I was maybe thinking was Jamal Lascelles, who's still there, and his contract also expires in the next season. But I thought to myself, I think with him being the previous captain of the club, I just think he's got the experience. I think he loves the club. I think there's no harm in keeping him around, especially considering some of the injury issues of those centre-backs as well. So if Dan Burn does then maybe have to move to left back because Lewis Hall's not quite 100%, then he can definitely be a decent option. But I think if you do sell Matt Targett, it's maybe 1, maybe 2 million at most, and it's going to be to a championship side. You're up next then with Nottingham Forest. Who do you think Nunes side needs to sell?
Yeah, this is one that I definitely think is more coming from the player, I would say, and that is Taiwo Awoniyi. I really, really rate him still. I feel like I really remember gassing him up in his first season at Forest. He got 10 goals in around 15 90s in total in his first season, and 15 in 24 at Union Berlin the season before that. And he has just had a bit of a torrid time at Newcastle. He's been hit by countless injuries, a few really, really severe injuries as well. And I think with that emergence of Chris Wood and how well Wood has played, Awoniyi is just not getting a sniff and has been reduced to cameo appearances, unfortunately. And I think he should just go back and try and find that form again and be a starting striker, because I think he has the real quality to do so. He's quick, he's strong, he's a really efficient finisher, and his hold-up play I think is fantastic as well. That I think in that first season with Forest we really saw where he's able to hold it up and get that transition going, as well as being that player who runs on beyond the final line of defence. And I think with Forest signing a new striker from Botafogo in Igor Jesus, could that be their new backup striker to Chris Wood, and that gives Awoniyi an opportunity to go? And I think they could get an okay amount of money for him, maybe sort of 15 million or so. I think a club would pay and take that risk on, given what we saw a few seasons ago, the quality of play that he could be.
I really like Awoniyi as well. I think he definitely has all the qualities to be a very good Premier League striker. He's big, he's strong, he's great back to goal. He's also got great acceleration to play on the last line. He's a decent finisher as well. And yeah, the him you saw in the Bundesliga is a very different one you're seeing to him now in Forest, and it is a little bit sad considering he showed so much potential. But yeah, I agree. I think go back to the Bundesliga for him. I think it's one where if Sesko scored 13 goals last season and is the 9th top goal scorer in the Bundesliga from last season, I think Awoniyi could get that amount of goals and that many assists. I think he got just under 20 goal returns in total. But I think Awoniyi could go back to the Bundesliga, do that, and probably because of his age and because of his injury history, which has now built up and accumulated a little bit, and clubs will look at that and maybe be reluctant to spend the big bucks on him. But I think go to a mid-table Bundesliga club, refine his form, and not spend out his days if he's like his wash, but then just have a very good back end to your career. And I think that's a move that makes perfect sense for everyone involved.
Yeah, and going back to where he was at his best, get a little bit more confidence, get that sort of comfort back, and fingers crossed stay injury free would just be massive for him, because it is a shame to see how well he played to then just see that knocked on. So yeah, like you say, get back to that goal scoring form.
Yeah, and you're up next with your next club because there was a bit of miscommunication in the running order. So you're going back to back, and then I'm going back to back after you. But next up, you got Spurs.
Yeah, Tottenham Hotspur, a difficult one again. I would say. I think they've got a pretty decent squad, and not too many players you would say are sort of clinging on and need to be cleared out of the squad. One that sticks out for me, and a fact about him that just is crazy. Spurs' second longest serving current player, Brian Hill. That is mental that he has been there that long. It's just never really worked out, has it? To be honest, um, he's had loans at Sevilla, at Valencia. Last season, he was at Girona, where he got some decent game time, but it's just never really worked out. I think, unfortunately, the Prem just doesn't really suit him. Technically, he seems really, really good, but he's neither quick nor strong, and I think that has been a real issue with him playing out wide in the Prem, especially. He hasn't really had many opportunities to play central, and I think probably is more of a winger naturally. He's 23 years old now, so he is still young, and I think certainly a move back to La Liga would just suit him well, considering he's basically spent the last 3 seasons there anyway. And also transfer link to Bologna as well is rumoured at the moment, so he's still got interest, he's still got quality, and for both sides, I think it just works out.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like you said, a player who's got great potential, but is just the wrong fit for the Premier League. And yes, his native Spain is an option, or Italy. I think he'd do great in either of those leagues. I could even see him get to a level where he's playing regularly for a Champions League side. I mean, he was for Girona last season. So, yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Go back, go back to Spain. I think is best for him. We move on then to Sunderland, who my pick for them, and I've gone for a player who I just don't think is good enough. And with all the players that Sunderland have signed so far this window, just won't get the minutes. He wasn't getting the minutes in the Championship last season, and I think he's just taking up a squad base and just basically get rid of him. And that's Ian Poveda, the 25-year-old winger, someone who played the majority of his games last season in Premier League 2 because he wasn't good enough for the first team for Sunderland last year. He made 6 substitute appearances last season. He came on for his Sunderland debut, got injured, and then I think he made his return, missed an open goal in his return match, and because he slipped, and then that slip also caused him to be out with another injury as well. There's also rumours that he's got a bad attitude, and he got a bit of an ego, sees himself as a Premier League player, but I just don't think it's going to be a Sunderland because I think he needs to. He was at Leeds before Sunderland. It didn't work out for him at Leeds. Sunderland were just a level below, as you saw, as Leeds got automatically promoted. Sunderland went through the playoffs. But I think he needs to go a step further down from that as well. Maybe bottom half of the Championship and, dare I say it, maybe even League One. But I think at 25, he's a Championship player at the very, very best. And it's going to take a lot for me to change my opinion on that. We'll see what he does in the next few years, though.
Yeah, I think with a player like that, if there's players who are maybe in and around the Championship side and a team gets promoted, there's always a bit of a risk if they get relegated and those big names move on that they need to keep some of those players around. But if at the time he wasn't even playing in the Championship, where is the risk involved? It seems like an easy one for them to just cut out, save a little bit on the wage bill, and open up an opportunity maybe for a youth player to step into where he has been on the bench or in the reserves.
Yeah, well, next I'll just move on then to West Ham United. And it's an interesting squad under Graham Potter. It's one where I'm still figuring out how they're going to go about it next year. But one player who just doesn't seem to be in the plans is Maxwell Cornet, the winger who signed in 2022 on a 5-year deal for £17.5 million from Burnley. I remember the time thinking to myself, that's a decent coup because I think Burnley were in the Premier League. They were doing okay, and then they signed Maxwell Cornet, and I thought to myself, oh, that's taking a player from a club who's in and around where you are at the moment. But then it just hasn't quite worked out for him. He was on loan at Southampton in the first half of last season in the Premier League. We saw how well that went for Southampton in general. He had manager Russell Martin, didn't trust him. And then he had Ivan Juric, he didn't fancy him either. Then in the second half of the season went on loan to Genoa. It seemed like manager Patrick Vieira seemed to enjoy having him and trusted him. But he made 2 starts, 5 appearances, and then he got injured. And then it's one where he keeps doing okay, getting injured, and managers just don't want to bring him back after that because he's basically made out of glass at this point. And I just think to myself, he's not going to get the minutes under Graham Potter. Graham Potter hasn't come out and explicitly said so, but has kind of hinted at the fact that maybe he needs to go off and find some game time somewhere else. So for me, I think this one just makes sense because he's got 2 years left on this contract. He's not going to be in the squad. Sell him on, and I think he could do a job for a new promoted side, but I think maybe the Premier League is a little bit, with its physicality and its high intensity, is just a little bit too much for someone who gets injured so often like he does. So maybe back to Italy. I think Spain could be a really good choice for him, or maybe even France, because if I'm right saying, I think he was formerly of Lyon. So yeah, I think Spain, France, Italy. I think a league where it's just a little bit slower might help prevent him from getting as injured as he has been.
Yeah, it's a shame that because I remember he had a really good purple patch at Burnley and he looked really, really good. And it looked like a great bit of business for West Ham to get him. He was a great FPL asset at the time as well, I remember, because he was really cheap and he just kept banging them in. Yeah, one of those forgotten players, to be honest. When you said him, I thought, bloody hell, I don't even remember him at West Ham being there or playing. So I think that's just a good shout because he's still got a name as well. I think people know the name and know what the player is, and I think that is good for West Ham if they are looking to move him on. It's not one of those players, these sort of unknown youngsters that they sign that don't turn out. He was already at least a little bit established, so it definitely works in terms of business for West Ham with that as well.
Yeah, and I think especially for a side in Europe, you could probably get him for maybe maximum 10 million euros. And I think for a side looking for a player, he's still quick despite his injuries. He's so dynamic, so I think you can definitely see that as an option despite his age. But you got the last club in Wolverhampton Wanderers. Who are you going to suggest for them?
Yeah, this is one that I feel like, again, similar to Brian Hill, has been a big money move. This one more than Hill. I think they originally bought for around 20 million. This player they bought for 35 a few seasons ago, and that is Fabio Silva, the Portuguese forward. It just has not worked out at all. He has really, really struggled in the Prem. He's had a number of loan moves to Rangers. He was on loan last season at Las Palmas, where I think he actually performed really well. 10 goals, 3 assists, and played a really decent number of games for them. But every time he stepped on the pitch for Wolves, it just has not worked. They need to cash in. They will be taking a loss, and it'll probably be around 15, 20 million he'll be going for eventually, with Dortmund interested, seeming the most likely rumour at the moment, which was quite surprising when I saw it. Yeah, just one to go. It's just from, I think it looked like he was potentially even going to go after one season at Wolves, let alone I think it's been 3 seasons now. So yeah, that's my final pick.
Yeah, I think if I remember the reports right, they want to sell him for about 22 million pounds or euros, and I think even that is asking for a bit much considering what the output he has delivered over the last few years. Undoubtedly a very good talent and definitely someone who's a project to try and get them back to the level they were before. But if it's a project worth taking it, and if that transfer doesn't work out, especially to a side in Europe who doesn't have as much money as the Premier League, that could be the difference between a manager working out or not. So you've got to be certain if you're going to be spending that much money on a player. The only good thing is he's still young, so he's still got time to develop, and you can still make him the striker you want him to be. But yeah, it's one where he's not getting anywhere near that ball side at the moment, is he?
Yeah, and I think he's lucky that he had a decent spell at Las Palmas, because I think even his loans before that he struggled at, and I know at Rangers he was pretty poor as well. So I think there's at least that as a silver lining to end on, that he had a good season last year.